Deleted Session, January 18, 1971, Monday. Good evening. Now, we will begin slowly. You both often lack perspective. When you compare yourselves with others, you often do so in material terms. Often, it seems to you that you have learned little, that your mental, psychic, spiritual, and physical situation should be far better. Now, neither of you know what difficulties are, in the terms with which most people speak. Rob noted, a point with which I can disagree. They said, now you are dealing, through your creative endeavors, aside even from the psychic work, with highly subjective material. Many people are completely unaware for great periods of time of their own mental and emotional states. These are projected so automatically into physical activities that they are then faced and manipulated as physical events. The connection between the two is never realized. They are not ready as yet to handle their own subjective material or possibilities. Do you follow me here? Rob said, yes. They said, the creative personality encounters his own subjective states in a way that others simply do not. These states are then manipulated, often subjectively, sometimes consciously. Such personalities are in much more immediate connections with their own moods, feelings, the interior climate of their being at any given time. Now, the persons who are immersed in physical activities must now and then have a counterpoint and an encounter with the inner state. The creative person must allow for sufficient outward goingness, so that the subjectivity is not latched upon too strongly. Ruber became frightened in the past, and long before our sessions. He had tried to dissociate himself from unpleasantness, because he was surrounded by so much. He led a very active physical life, however, and to some degree then could work off some of the emotional feelings that were repressed. He began in our work to become more aware of these feelings, and extremely frightened at expressing any of them, for many of the reasons given by me in the past. Both of you, however, have a tendency to dig inward, and to concentrate upon negatives. Now, if you were different kinds of people, you see, your own moods would fluctuate widely in the normal give and take with other individuals. You, Ram noted, to me. They said, at your job are helped in that manner. Ruber closed off even from you the expression of his fears. Many quite normal fears, dangerous only because he considered them so. I have told you in the past to make room in your daily or weekly or monthly lives for a variety of a quite normal kind. I mentioned, for example, long ago, short trips. When ordinary measures are not taken, then more drastic ones become necessary. Your greater communication is of benefit, and was of great benefit this weekend. There are cycles, highly individualistic, of emotional moods. Depressions that are communicated allow the feelings to move on, regardless of the reasons for the depression. An honest acceptance of the feeling is paramount. They must be accepted as real on their own terms. Then, the way is cleared for the cycle to move. Resulting inhibited energy is then released. Now, in the past, Rupert would brood over the feelings, leading him into a physical apathy. He was ashamed of the feelings. Both of you, however, still overemphasize the entire situation. You do not see yourselves as human beings in a quite human environment, but against some perfect yardstick, and this applies for you. Ram noted, to me. Seth said also. Rupert blooms like a flower in his classes, simply because everyone thinks he is quite wonderful, and he responds. Rob asked, why doesn't he think he's wonderful himself? Seth said, I told you I was starting out slowly. You both have become somewhat ingrown. The basis now of Rupert's situation is not largely from the past. He does have attitudes, as I told him last evening, that you had some 10 years ago, setting up so strongly the idea of responsibility and the lack of lifetime. Ram noted, physical time to live. Seth said, that spontaneity became severely hampered. The brooding also involves your present situation, the two of you in it, and the future. You rarely discussed together future plans. He took this to mean you had none. At times, he simply wears his body out, and it requires additional rest. But he takes this as a sign of sloth and laziness. Some change within a stable framework is really your answer, with adequate and emotional communication. Many of the fears have been trivial, but he would not discuss them. One worry then would automatically be associated with a pile of other buried worries, and an ordinary unpleasant stimuli could evoke the whole works. A great day becomes therefore a symbol that the sunny inner self is clouded, and he feared he could not change himself any more than he could the weather. Above all, the fears could not be discussed with you, particularly if they seemed trivial. He never wanted you to equate him with your mother. Ram noted, I laughed here. Seth said, and felt that a display of unpleasant emotions would only get your scorn. You may take your break. Now, pitiful or not, the two of you have been concentrating too much upon your physical problems. This has drained your creative energies, and also led you to overestimate the problems themselves. If I were telling this to someone else, you would think it was excellent advice and wonder why it was not taken to heart. Rupert needs somewhat more change within a definite framework than you do. But you also need to refresh your own energies. Concentration upon a problem to such an extent does not allow the inner self the freedom to help you solve it, and a condition arises where you expect the worst and bring it therefore about. The simple measures of going out, for example, allow a break-up of stimuli, a free give and take of emotional moods. The conscious mind is fascinated, and the inner self frees them to act constructively. Encouraging Rupert to discuss his fears is important, but there is no one reason behind this. Consciousness is not that simple. All of the sessions Ruber has on his clipboard are important, and discuss different aspects that are pertinent. Those sessions followed, and the advice he did provide you with your answer. Rob asked, "Then why doesn't he do it?" Seth said, "Part of the reason is the negative input that you both are responsible for. With the negative and destructive attitudes you had before our sessions, you are both very lucky that you did not run into more difficulty. Now, what are your questions?" Rob noted, "I had quite a few questions to ask, but since my anger had still been building up, I now did not write them down, or Seth's answers, which were very good. Incidentally, I was deeply irritated and frustrated." A sharp exchange with Seth followed, and I ended up furious, which I suppose was a good way to blow off steam. Seth insisted that the answers read Jane's symptoms, and my own contributing attitudes had already been given in past sessions, but were not being followed. Seth said, "Now, the condition is the result of unhealthy and negative patterns. Mental patterns that the young adolescent body managed to cope with through the thyroid condition. This was the safety valve. Now, when I said the problem lay mainly in the present, I did not emphasize past roots, where the patterns originated. It is the patterns themselves, regardless of their origin, that is now important." Ruber became afraid that the thyroid condition would lead into erratic behavior, and after the Florida incident, he slammed doors to expression down. Because he appeared so talkative, you did not recognize the point where he began to hide his fearful thought or feelings from you. This was during your illness, when he felt they frightened you. He felt then, of course, that erratic behavior was out of the question, and closing that door. He also closed the door largely to emotional expression. He watched his every word and action with you during your illness. The incident in Florida served to frighten him into that reaction. The pattern had always included a strong tendency of withdrawal superimposed and enforced upon a very spontaneous self. As a child, he closed off the expression of emotion from his mother out of fear, and when the fear element becomes strong, as it did later for a different reason, with what? And much later for a far different reason with you. The pattern was reasserted. When he felt unwanted, this was also his reaction. Initially, there would be no outward change of behavior, except for a compensatory additional noisiness of feeling guilty and singing. For some time, the organism could take this, and as situations changed, the spontaneous self would once again emerge. With a changing physical situation necessitating agile manipulation, the physical stimulations came so quickly that the pattern did not have a chance to gel. It did not become a normal pattern of behavior, but one that was now and then adopted. When you were ill, the incident rearoused his fears concerning his mother, you see. As he had watched her very mood, he watched yours, and for a short time, he interpreted your actions in a very accusing light toward himself. Now, running away from problems, literally in space, had always been his answer to everything. One day, he could run away from his mother, and he did. One day, he could leave Walt, and he did. But he loved you deeply, and there was no place he could run to, nor from the problems represented by your parents. Now, he adjusted very well to these, but an inner portion of his self, you see, is thoroughly outraged. Considering all parents enemies from whom one should and must legitimately run. Intellectually, he understood that changes had to be made in his attitude, and he tried to treat your family kindly, and consciously to make up to his mother by being nice to yours. From that situation, he could not or would not run, but in his mind, he saw the two of you running free of all of them. He gave little expression to his feelings toward your mother, in a mad rush to get to the respectable and responsible attitude he thought he should have. These issues are all important, since he could not run in space, and did not, when the pattern of withdrawal began, express his resentment. He still turns off the radio when you come into the room, for fear the noise, which to him will be interpreted by you as aggressive noise feelings, will annoy you. It was only too easy for you to accept this withdrawal without recognizing it for what it was, because of your own background. And I mentioned some allied material here in the near contact station. Rob noted last night. Seth said, now, these repressions operated constantly in daily life. The effort required to repress such material is tremendous, and the muscular motions affected. Rob said, are these repressions still operating? Rob noted, as Seth, Jen gestured to me to wait. I asked the question because I thought we had cracked this wall over the weekend and was anxious for confirmation. I thought we had made a very important start. Seth said, he adopted the symptoms partially out of example, both from his mother and from your own illness. He has made gains. But he had not made gains as far as fears were concerned at all. Some, with aggressions, he was not consciously aware enough of the fears. He had shoved them so far underground. The body does not have control over the conscious thoughts. Rob noted, this in answer to one of the points I had been mad about earlier in the session. Seth said, however, when care is taken to relieve the inhibiting nature of conscious thoughts, the body organism sends up energetic emotions that act as physical impetus. That is why a feeling of helplessness is so destructive. I understand your problem. You cannot quite get it through your heads that your thoughts form your reality. Rob said, no, I believe that. But I get very mad at the way other thoughts interfere with good or healthy constructions. I probably mean that I get mad at the way old habits, bad ones, interfere or come first. I know what I mean here, but I'm not putting it very well. Seth said, this is part of the learning process, something that must be understood before you leave your last reincarnation, and it is precisely for this reason that you deal so directly now with thoughts, subjective states, and their effects. Now, together at least several times a week for a month. Read the sessions that Robert has on his clipboard, at least those portions outlined, together, as if you had not begun any of this before. Encourage Robert toward motion, and have he encourage himself. The idea should be, I can do more, and more easily. Some recommendations I will not give you now. They are in those sessions. Have Robert verbalize his fears in whatever way you choose. Feelings of helplessness should also be verbalized. If they are not, they pile up also. Improvements should be noted, however. You should discuss plans in Robert's terms with each other. These recommendations will pay off. Understanding the pattern of behavior should allow Robert to take definite steps to alter it. He does not have to creep around the house to be quiet either. For example, now take a moment and see what questions you have. Rob said, I was wondering about the feeling of helplessness he gets. Seth said, when he feels that way, he inhibits the feeling and does not admit it. Rob asked, why the feeling to start with? Seth said, having to do with his condition. That he will not get better, for example. But all of the feelings mentioned tonight, and the unexpressed fears, add up to a formless anxiety that can give him a feeling of helplessness, and that is extremely important. Rob said, I would say very important indeed. Seth said, there are small areas, quite trivial in comparison, that could serve as counterpoints. As mentioned, any changes within your framework at present that can be introduced. A project in which you can both become involved. That need not necessitate a great amount of time. Painting or furniture. Bright curtains at these windows. Any beneficial changes in the environment of that nature. Now, take your break or end the session as you prefer. Now, I am going to end our session. However, one point. Unrecognized and unchallenged fears cannot be dealt with adequately until they are released. Regardless of their intellectual status, they are highly charged, though they may appear as trivial. The personality attempts to protect itself from them, for the reasons given, but the psychic energy behind them will leap up and attach itself to events. Because the fears are not accepted individually, they have a collective charge, which when properly triggered evokes the feeling of helplessness. The feeling then seems to be out of all proportion to whatever current event seems to have evoked it. The personality is then bewildered, feeling the weight of this as a pole. Reassurance should be given then that the fears can be expressed, and not judged intellectually. Often when Robert is alone, the weight of these unexpressed fears is strongly upon him, then acting like a cloud that holds him down. Rob asked what happened a couple of months ago that thought of this current set of problems through his knees, so that he has trouble walking. Seth said, you understand from what I have said that a strong reaction can be felt from a seemingly insignificant issue. Understand also, however, that the opposite also holds. An excellent suggestion or emotion-taking route, even though trivial, can have a far-reaching beneficial effect. In that case, however, he expected from the tool much better results. Rob noted, to publicize James the Seth material. Seth said, after the tour, to his way of thinking, there was nothing. He was picked up by the tour and then dropped back. He felt as if Prentice had forgotten him, and that Tom was not interested in his dream book. The visits, for example, had ceased. He missed the New York calls and the conversation. Rob asked, what did happen there? Seth said, with what? Rob said, well, with Tim, for example. Seth said, Tim, for example, is simply in a different position now, with more to do. He is confident Ruber will produce a good book, and while busy attempts to keep in touch with him. He was written Ruber, for example, more than Ruber has written to him. But with Ruber's mind, it had to be more an all or nothing affair. Rob asked, what did happen after the tour? I always thought something happened after that, to cool things off. They said, matters mainly of finance having to do with the company itself, and with the recession, and with which books they thought would make the quickest returns, not necessarily the more stable long-run returns. Rob asked, did they figure correctly? They said, they were thinking in terms of this year and affairs of Texas. They tried to place psychic developments behind the Iron Curtain, for example, from a political as well as a psychic viewpoint, and decided to put more of their money into that initially for that reason. Now, I am going to end our session. Please do follow my advice, and then yell if you do not think it works. Rob said, all right, thank you very much, Seth.